Some mysteries, the veteran said quietly, are not meant to be solved. Some warnings are not meant to be tested. Some lessons are so expensive that learning them would cost everything you have and everything you are. The lesson unlearned. But the student was young and ambitious. The records were already uploaded to their personal storage, backed up in encrypted files. They would study them in secret. They would present them to the military council when they graduated. They would be the one to succeed where all others failed. In her garden on Earth, the old woman paused in her work. She felt a familiar stirring, not in the physical world, but in the spaces between. The Guardian had sensed something, new ambition, new danger, new fools approaching who had not learned from the lessons written in silence and empty ships. She sighed and continued tending her roses. In another 1,000 years, perhaps less, she would sit in a command chamber of a doomed fleet. She would offer a choice to a broken commander. She would send them home to deliver a warning that the next generation would ignore. The cycle would continue. It always did, because some lessons, it seemed, had to be learned over and over. And the price was always paid in silence. Once accepted, lasted forever. She was humanity's ambassador to its guardian, the bridge between species and protector, the voice that offered choices to those who ignored warnings. She didn't complain about her burden. She had volunteered for it long ago when she understood what humanity had and what that meant. Someone needed to speak to those who came with conquest in their hearts. Someone needed to offer mercy even to the merciless. The eternal vigil. Beyond Earth's atmosphere, beyond the moon, beyond the edge of the solar system, something vast stirred in its sleep. It had no name that human languages could pronounce. It had no form that human eyes could perceive. It existed in dimensions that human science had barely theorized. But loved, that was the one thing everyone who encountered it agreed upon. It loved humanity with a love that was absolute, unquestioning, and eternal. Why it chose humanity remained a mystery. Perhaps humans were its creation. Perhaps they had made some ancient bargain. Perhaps the relationship formed randomly, a cosmic accident that became unbreakable over millions of years. The reason didn't matter. Only the result mattered. And the result was simple. Humanity was protected. Absolutely. Completely. Without exception. The price of ignorance. In a war academy on a planet 50,000 light years from Earth, a young military student discovered ancient records in a forgotten database. They spoke of a small species that had never been conquered, a blue world that fleets entered but never left, warnings that stretched back millennia. The student brought these records to their instructor, an old veteran covered in scars from 100 battles. "Teacher," the student asked, "should we not test ourselves against this mystery? Should we not attempt what others failed?" The instructor looked at the young student for a long moment. Then, slowly, carefully, the old veteran deleted the records from the student's datapad. Research stations on distant worlds. They established embassies with alien governments. They sent their children to study at alien universities and welcomed alien students to Earth. They were friendly, curious, genuinely interested in other species' cultures and ideas. And everywhere they went, they were welcomed with warmth that seemed excessive. Trade deals that favored humans slightly more than made sense. Diplomatic negotiations where others yielded on minor points without explanation. Military forces that gave human vessels wide berth in space lanes. Humans attributed this to their diplomatic skill or perhaps their reputation for reliability. They never suspected the truth. The unspoken respect. In bars and meeting halls across the galaxy, in quiet conversations between old soldiers and experienced diplomats, the truth was passed down. Be kind to humans, elders told their young. Never threaten them. Never even appear to threaten them. When asked why, the explanations varied. They're well-connected. They have powerful allies. They're protected by treaty. All technically true, none telling the full truth. Because the full truth was too terrifying for most species to contemplate. That somewhere, wrapped around humanity like an invisible shield, something ancient and incomprehensible watched. And if you threatened what it loved, you didn't fight it. You didn't negotiate with it. You simply stopped existing quietly and completely, as if you had never been at all. The guardian sleeps. On Earth, in a garden where flowers bloomed year-round through methods no botanist could quite explain, an old woman tended roses. She had tended this garden for longer than any normal human lifespan should allow. She was the same woman who had spoken to Craxus 1,000 years ago. The same woman who would speak to the next ambitious invader 1,000 years hence. She didn't age normally. She didn't die. Some bargains, once made, couldn't be broken. Some roles had seen too much. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe the guardian doesn't choose at all. Maybe it just loves. And love doesn't require the beloved to deserve it. Love simply is the new law established. The council voted unanimously. Soul system would be declared eternally forbidden, not just to the Jothic Empire, but to all spacefaring species they had contact with. The Forbidden Zone would extend 10 light years in all directions from Earth. Any vessel entering that zone would be destroyed by Jothic forces as an act of mercy. Better to die by their hand than face whatever waited in the Soul system. All records of Craxus's expedition would be sealed in the deepest archives. The official story would say the fleet was lost to a navigational disaster, a wormhole collapse, or stellar anomaly. The truth would be known only to the keepers and the highest levels of government. Future generations must not forget this warning, Varkoth declared. But neither can we allow panic to spread across the Empire. Fear of Earth must be balanced with respect. The cycle's continuation. 1,000 years passed. The Jothic Empire rose and fell, replaced by new civilizations. The galaxy turned, stars died and were born, and the memory of Craxus's disaster faded into legend. But in the archives of every ancient species, in the deepest and most secure databases, the warnings remained. Do not approach Soul. Do not threaten humanity. Something watches over them, and it does not forgive. Yet every 1,000 years, as if following some cosmic schedule, a new species would discover Earth. Young, ambitious, confident in their weapons and their destiny. And despite the warnings in those ancient archives, despite the testimony of broken survivors, despite all logic and reason, they would convince themselves that this time would be different. Meanwhile, humans spread across the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as explorers, traders, diplomats, and scientists. They built. It's alive, but not in any way we understand life. The human woman called it their guardian, but that's wrong too. It's not guarding them like a soldier guards a fortress. He struggled to find words for something beyond language. It's more like how a parent shields a child, or how a heart protects itself. It's not separate from humanity. It's part of them, or they're part of it. The relationship is so old, so fundamental, that trying to separate them would be like trying to separate space from time. The ancient bond. Elder Vimora spoke, her voice carrying the weight of accumulated knowledge. The few scholars who study the Forbidden Archives have theories. Some believe the Guardian is an ancient artificial intelligence created by humanity's precursors. Others think it's a dimensional entity that formed a symbiotic relationship with humans millions of years ago. A few believe it's something even stranger, that Earth itself is sentient and humans are its chosen children. She gestured to the holographic display showing Soul System. What we know for certain is this. The bond predates human spaceflight by thousands of years. Ancient human mythology speaks of protectors, gods, angels, spirits. Perhaps those were early encounters with the Guardian's influence. Perhaps humanity has been protected since their species first evolved consciousness. Why humanity? But why them? General Vextar asked, his voice anguished. Why are these weak creatures given such protection? They have no natural weapons, no armor, no exceptional strength. By all logic, they should be prey species. Why does something so powerful choose to defend them? Craxus answered, though it pained him to speak. I asked the human woman that. She said. He paused, remembering her sad smile. She said that maybe the Guardian protects them precisely because they're vulnerable, that humanity's weakness makes them worthy of protection, not unworthy. He looked at the council members with eyes that And you've been in this system far too long. Then she was gone, and Craxus was alone with only the sounds of his empty ship and the whispers calling his name from the darkness. A single escape pod emerged from the Sol system 3 weeks after the fleet had entered. It drifted more than flew, its power nearly depleted, its occupant barely alive. Jothic border patrols recovered it and were shocked to find Warlord Craxus inside. Emaciated, his scales dull and cracked, his eyes haunted by visions no one else could see. He hadn't eaten during the journey home. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the empty ships, heard the whispers, felt the presence of something so vast it made galaxies seem small. They brought him to the medical station, but no amount of treatment could heal what had broken inside him. The doctors repaired his body. His mind, they said, might never recover. The testimony. The Jothic High Council convened an emergency session. They had lost 800 warships and 50,000 soldiers. The largest military disaster in their empire's history. And the only survivor was a broken warlord who spoke in whispers and fragments. Elder Vimora was called from her archives. She stood beside Craxus as he gave his testimony, her expression sorrowful but unsurprised. She had heard testimonies like this before. They didn't fight us, Craxus said, his voice barely audible. Humans never even deployed weapons. They just watched as something else harvested us like crops. He described the vanishings in detail. The empty ships, the whispers, the sense of being slowly erased from existence. We never saw it clearly, just glimpses, shadows that moved wrong. Spaces between spaces that shouldn't exist. It was there all around us, patient as eternity. The nature of the Guardian. What is it? Suprema Commander Vorkot demanded. What technology could do this? What weapon? Craxus laughed, a broken sound. Not technology, not a weapon. He finally ordered, his voice hoarse from screaming commands that no longer mattered. All ships, maximum speed, exit the system immediately. But the navigation computers wouldn't respond. Helm controls were locked. The ships could move anywhere within the Sol system, but couldn't leave it. They were trapped in a cage made of nothing, held by something that couldn't be seen or fought or understood. The Visitor. On the 8th day, Craxus sat alone in his command chamber, his weapon drawn, but knowing it was useless. The door opened though he had locked it. A human entered, a woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She wore simple clothing, nothing military or threatening. She looked like someone's grandmother. She sat down across from him without asking permission. Every 1,000 years, she said gently, someone like you comes here. Someone ambitious. Someone certain they can succeed where others failed. Someone who doesn't listen to warnings. Craxus tried to speak, but found his voice gone. The woman continued. We don't control what protects us. We don't even fully understand it. It's been with humanity since before we had words. Some call it our guardian. Some call it our shadow. Some call it Earth's fury. None of those names are quite right. The choice offered. She leaned forward, and Craxus saw something ancient in her eyes. Not age exactly, but accumulated sorrow. It doesn't hate you, she said. It doesn't feel hatred or anger or vengeance. It simply does not allow threats to approach what it loves. And it has loved humanity for longer than your species has existed. She stood to leave. I'm giving you what it gave the survivors before you. A choice. You can stay here and join your crew in whatever place they've gone. Or you can take one shuttle, alone, and return home to deliver a warning that the next ambitious fool will ignore just as you ignore the last. She walked to the door, then paused. If you choose to leave, go now. Its patience is not infinite. Footsteps that stop just outside sealed doors. And always, the sense of being watched by something vast and patient and utterly alien to all concepts of mercy or malice. The message from Earth. On the 3rd day in the system, as half the fleet had already been emptied of life, a transmission came from Earth. It was simple, text only, translated into perfect Jothic. You were warned. The elders told you. Every species is told. Some listen. Most don't. We're not doing this to you. We never do. But something loves us, and it does not share. That was all. No threats, no demands for surrender, No explanation of what was happening. Just acknowledgement that this had happened before and would happen again. Craxus tried to respond, to communicate, to negotiate, to threaten. Anything to make this nightmare stop. But every message he sent disappeared into the void, unanswered. Earth was not interested in communication. Earth was simply waiting. Mass vanishings. On the 5th day, entire battle groups ceased to exist simultaneously. 20 ships for 1,000 crew, gone between one sensor sweep and the next. Not destroyed. Their vessels remained, power cores still humming, but empty of all life. Some ships were found with their escape pods still intact. Others had their pods launched into space, but when recovery teams retrieved them, they found only empty seats and abandoned pressure suits. Whatever was taking the Jothic didn't care about their attempts to flee. It found them regardless. It took them regardless. Silent. Thorough. Inevitable. Craxus's breaking point. By the 7th day, only 200 ships retained their crews. 600 vessels drifted empty around the remaining fleet like grave markers. Craxus had not slept in days. He saw things in the shadows of his bridge, figures that vanished when he looked directly at them. He heard his mother's voice calling from the ventilation system. His hands shook constantly. We retreat. Beds were unmade, personal items scattered around. In the command center, the captain's chair still held the indentation of someone who had been sitting there moments ago. But the crew was gone. All 47 of them. Vanished without a trace. No blood, no signs of struggle, no indication of what had happened. Their uniforms remained, neatly folded in lockers. Their weapons sat in their holsters. Even their communication devices were still active, still transmitting. Nothing. The boarding party searched every compartment, every storage space, every possible hiding place. They found only emptiness and the eerie sense that they were being watched by something they couldn't see. The pattern accelerates. The boarding party returned to their shuttle pale and shaking. Before they could even report their findings, 2 more ships went silent. Then 5 more. Then a dozen. All at the edges of the formation, like something was systematically picking off stragglers. Craxus ordered the fleet to tighten formation, every ship within visual range of others. It didn't help. Ships vanished from the center of the formation now, surrounded by dozens of witnesses who saw nothing. One moment a destroyer was there, its crew visible through the viewing ports. The next moment, the viewing ports were empty. The ship remained, but everyone inside had simply ceased to exist. The psychological breakdown. Panic spread through the fleet like a plague. Soldiers who had faced death 1,000 times now trembled at shadows. Officers who had led charges against impossible odds now refused to leave their quarters. Some crews sealed themselves in their ship's centers, hoping that being surrounded by more walls would protect them. It didn't. The vanishings continued. The worst part wasn't the disappearances themselves. It was the sounds that preceded them. Crew members began reporting whispers in empty corridors, voices calling their names in the voices of dead comrades. They would succeed where others failed. He was wrong. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system with all the confidence of predators entering a rabbit's den. Long-range sensors immediately detected the human settlements, a small orbital station around the 3rd planet, mining colonies on various moons, a modest research outpost on Mars. Nothing that could threaten even a single Jothic warship, let alone 800. They don't even have defensive satellites, Commander Thress reported with barely concealed amusement. Their largest vessel is a cargo transport. We could conquer this system with a dozen ships. Craxus nodded but felt uneasy. The journey had been too smooth, too easy. Space itself felt wrong here, charged with something his sensors couldn't detect. Maintain formation, he ordered. No one acts without my command. The first silence. The Vanguard scout ship, the Swift Talon, moved ahead to survey the system's outer planets. Its captain, a veteran of 30 campaigns, reported normal readings. Gas giants with colorful clouds. Ice-covered moons. Standard stellar phenomena. Then, mid-transmission, the captain's voice simply stopped. Not cut off by static or interference. Just stopped, as if someone had pressed a pause button on reality itself. Swift Talon, Respond, the communications officer called. Silence. Swift Talon, this is Fleet Command. Report your status. Nothing. Sensors showed the ship was still there, power readings normal, engines functioning. But no one answered. Craxus ordered a recovery team dispatched. The recovery shuttle docked with the Swift Talon, and the boarding party entered cautiously, weapons ready. What they found would haunt them for the rest of their brief lives. The empty ship. The Swift Talon was intact. Every system functioning perfectly. Lights on, life support operational, computers still processing commands. In the mess hall, meals sat on tables, still warm. In the crew quarters, even some of the older commanders, who believed their modern technology could overcome ancient curses. Only a handful abstained. Those who had lived long enough to respect mysteries they couldn't explain. The motion carries, Varkoth declared. Warlord Craxus, you are authorized to assemble a conquest fleet. Make the Jothic Empire proud. The Elder's prophecy. Vimora stood slowly, placing the corrupted data crystal back in her robes. Before she retreated to the Keeper's alcove, she turned to face Craxus directly. Her 4 eyes locked onto his, and he felt a chill despite the warm chamber. I have performed this duty 3 times in my long life, she said quietly. Each time, I presented the evidence. Each time, I was ignored. Each time, I watched broken survivors return with madness in their eyes and silence in their souls. She moved closer to Craxus, and her next words were barely a whisper. You will see things that should not exist. You will hear silence that screams. You will watch your soldiers vanish between one heartbeat and the next. And if you survive to return, you will sit where I sit, showing these same records to the next ambitious youth who thinks they can succeed where all others failed. Fleet preparation begins. Within days, the Empire mobilized its largest invasion force in history. 800 warships assembled in orbit around the Jothic homeworld. The finest vessels ever built, armed with weapons that could shatter planets, protected by shields that could withstand stars going supernova. 50,000 of the Empire's best soldiers boarded those ships, warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds, who knew no fear, who sang songs of glory as they prepared for departure. Craxus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance, and watched his fleet assemble. It was beautiful, this armada of death and conquest, the largest fleet ever sent to claim Earth. Surely, he thought, this time would be different. This time, they would succeed. Analyzed the few surviving testimonies, searched for patterns. Do you want to know what I found? She manipulated the display, showing a timeline spanning 7 millennia. Every 1,000 years, almost exactly, a new civilization discovers Earth. Every time they are warned. Every time, young commanders dismiss those warnings as cowardice or superstition. Every time they send their fleets. And every time, silence follows. The timeline showed it clearly. 7,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago. And now, they stood at the beginning of another cycle. We are not the first to scoff at these warnings, Vimora continued. We are simply the latest in a long line of fools who believe our weapons make us invincible. Craxus's ambition. But Craxus was not deterred. His entire life had been built on taking risks others feared. He had studied military history, learned from the mistakes of those who came before. He would not repeat their errors. Perhaps, he said carefully, those civilizations failed because they approached Earth with hostility. The humans are said to be peaceful, diplomatic. If we offer trade first, establish communication, shall we come as partners rather than conquerors? Vimora's laugh was bitter. You think you are the first to consider diplomacy? The Quillith Dominance sent ambassadors before their warships. The ambassadors vanished too. Whatever protects humanity does not distinguish between hostile intent and friendly approach. It simply does not allow interference. Supreme Commander Varkoth, leader of the entire Jothic military, had remained silent throughout the debate. Now he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The Elder Keeper has presented historical evidence. Warlord Craxus has presented strategic opportunity. We shall vote. All in favor of claiming the Sol system. Hands rose across the chamber. The young officers, eager for glory, the ambitious generals, seeking new conquests, appeared. 1,000 years ago, the Esikitar Brotherhood, warrior monks who had never known defeat, approached Earth with righteousness in their hearts and holy fire in their weapons. 800 ships, gone, erased from reality as if they had never been. Craxus studied the records with growing unease. The sensor logs were incomplete, corrupted, but what remained showed impossible things. Ships reporting normal operations one moment, then their signals simply ending mid-transmission. Not destroyed, that would leave debris, energy signatures, something. These vessels just ceased to be, as if the universe had deleted them from existence. What weapon could do this? Asked General Vextar, one of Craxus's most loyal commanders. Surely some technology we can counter. Vimora's expression was grim. If it were technology, we could fight it. This is something else. Something older. The few survivors who escaped, those lucky or cursed enough to return, they spoke of a presence. Not human. Something that guards humanity. Something that does not fight or threaten or warn. It simply removes threats. The mockery begins. Craxus's younger officers began to mutter among themselves. Some laughed quietly. With respect, Elder, said Commander Thress, this sounds like ghost stories to frighten hatchlings. Mysterious disappearances? Ancient guardians? We are the Jothic Empire. We do not fear shadows and legends. Other voices joined in agreement. The humans are primitives, someone called out. They barely understand faster-than-light travel. Their worlds are undefended. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Perhaps those ancient fleets suffered navigation failures, another suggested, or encountered natural phenomena, black holes, spatial anomalies. There are rational explanations that don't require invisible monsters. Vimora waited for the mockery to subside before speaking again. I have studied these records for my entire life, she said quietly. I have compared sensor logs. Warlord Craxus stood before the assembled generals of the Jothic Empire, his crimson scales gleaming under the light of 1,000 battle honors hanging on the chamber walls. He was young for a warlord, barely 3 centuries old, but his conquest spoke louder than his age. 40-star systems had fallen to his fleets. 20 species now served the Empire as workers and soldiers. His name was whispered across the galaxy as the future of Jothic dominance. Today he proposed his most ambitious conquest yet, a small blue world on the edge of explored space called Earth. No, the single word cut through Craxus's presentation like a blade through silk. All eyes turned to the shadowed alcove where the keepers dwelled. Elder Vimora emerged slowly. Her scales faded to pale gray with age, her 4 eyes clouded but still sharp with ancient wisdom. She carried a data crystal that pulsed with a sickly green light. The soul system is forbidden, she said, her voice like grinding stone. It has been forbidden for 5,000 years. 3 civilizations before ours learned why. None survived to repeat their lessons. Craxus felt his battle-earned confidence waver slightly, but he pushed it down. With respect, Elder Keeper, those were primitive times. We have weapons those ancient empires could not imagine. Vimora placed the crystal on the holographic projector. Images filled the air, star charts marked with red warnings, sensor logs showing fleet movements, and then nothing. The Vormak hegemony, she began, pointing to the first set of records. 7,000 years ago, they ruled 1,000 worlds. They sent 2,000 warships to claim Earth. Not one returned. No distresignals. No reiki. The ships simply stopped existing. She advanced the display. 3,000 years later, the Quillith dominants tried. They were masters of dimensional warfare, able to fold space itself. They sent 500 of their best vessels. All vanished in the span of a single night. A third image,